Hello and welcome back. I'm Aoife White. I'm Politico Europe's competition and tech editor. And today we're talking about 5G and beyond, the future of connectivity. I have with me in London, Seizo Onoe, from the Director of the Telecommunications Standardization Bureau at the International Telecommunication Union, coming all the way from Geneva today. And I have Per Bemming, the Vice President, Head of Standard and Industry Initiatives at Ericsson. And on the line we should have Peter Stuckmann. There you are. Hello, Peter.
Good afternoon. Hi.
European Commission's Head of Unit and Deputy Director of Future Networks at DG Connect. So if I can start with you, one of the questions we have on 5G, we've been talking an awful lot about Europe and about the UK. Can you tell us what 5G, what role it plays for developing countries and your work on that?
Yes, actually, first let me answer to your question for the full context of this session. Actually, this original question was who will be the winner for 5G and who will take a lead for 6G. But actually, until last year, I worked for the mobile operators R&D, so I was in the center of that race. So, but actually at the time, we have a close collaboration with Ericsson, Fabemin-san. But at the last few years, I was in the position watching the such heated race calmly and coolly. So in those days, from that days, I was feeling uncomfortable with the marketing gimmicks accelerate the generation, mobile generation, 5G, 6G, 7G, 8G, blah, blah, blah. So, but now I'm now working for the ITU. Now we are now looking at the not only tech leaders, winners, and but also we need to watch whole players, including the late adopters and last ones. So in that case, we need to involve developing countries. So then the developing countries need to encourage, should be involved in such activities for the future technologies. That we are now, IQT is encouraging participation from developing countries to contribute to such issues. Actually, we have we see many difference between among the regions. So I realize that narrowing the gap and bridging the gap is very important. That's my view.
Peter, do you see 5G as a race and who's winning it?
Yes, we're following this race since quite a while. So we have the tool so-called 5G Observatory, which we launched already several years ago. So it was first the readiness, mainly about getting the spectrum out to the market. I think there Europe has created big opportunities. So we have low, mid, and high band, and unfortunately, still some has to be assigned. So we know it's like for the prime bands for low and mid, we are like at 80% still, so that the full potential is not yet there. So that's always a challenge for Europe. But I think there we have an opportunity in Europe, and then we have seen that we had quite a good start. We have now basic deployments. I think Joachim mentioned a bit the differences between some 5G versions. So I think for the first launch, as we called it, Europe was quite well, considering also the market barrier or the market fragmentation we have. And then what is now, I think the challenge is to looking into investment, really making the effort to go towards standalone 5G, using the mid-band. So we need also more investment in infrastructure, some additional sites. So there we see some areas in the world where things are taking off a bit faster, also because some, like Korea, for example, doesn't have so much low band, so they're going into mid-band a bit faster. US is more or less, in terms of base stations, Europe is better, but we see that some operators that have mid-band are now quite dynamic. So I think overall, the race has just started. It's now important that we put up a gear and really enable the real transformations that we can expect with 5G, both for the consumers, but also then, as Joachim mentioned before, the business-to-business opportunities.
Yeah, when we've seen China's industrial use of 5G as something that's really remarkable and hasn't yet been mirrored in Europe. How do you think that could happen? Is it a case that you need to make to industry? How could it be rolled out?
Yeah, I think we have opportunities. Of course, we have strong industries in Europe. So there we see things happening in some sectors. So it's a bit like building ecosystems, and this works sector by sector. Especially in Europe, we have quite a market approach, where maybe in China or other Asian countries it's sometimes a bit more top-down, where things are orchestrated, but then maybe the market is not always responding, or in some cases yes, some cases no. While we have this ecosystem challenge, I think we have opportunities. So we see some first developments here, especially when you look at manufacturing. We have some campus networks that are emerging, some commercial ones, some more in trial and pilots. And then when it comes to the other ecosystems, looking at automotive, for example, we have sometimes the challenge that we have a good base, so a good industrial base, but then also some legacy that we have to overcome, and the way we have to work with the stakeholders to sometimes make shift to more modern technologies. And so this is an exercise that we're doing also with public funding, where we're creating these ecosystems both on the research program, but also in deployment programs.
Per, where do you see the 5G race from the industry perspective?
Yes, so first of all, I concur with what many have said already, that the race is on, it's not finished, we are not even close to the finish line. However, I think one needs to put yourself into a good position already from the start, and as the race goes on. And unfortunately, I think Europe is a bit behind, so Europe needs to catch up. The one that is leading and driving most aggressively now is actually India. They are launching a lot of base stations every day. And they also have a program for how to address the industrial use cases and tasking their universities, etc., to innovate on top of the network, because you need to have connectivity there for people to innovate on. I don't think that the telcos, the operators, us, Ericsson, vending, providing equipment, actually can do all of that innovation that will actually change and give the promises what we think 5G can give. So I think that is the important thing, to get that going and have good conditions, because we have heard about return of investment of operators. We have need to have access to spectrum. There are some, they need to also get credibility when it comes to the industries that actually going to trust them, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of things that needs to happen, and first of all, we need to have the connectivity there in order for people to innovate on top of it.
I mean, you talked about India having an industrial plan on this, essentially.
Yeah, Prime Minister Modi just launched it this spring, and I also tasked a number of universities to actually get 5G networks and to build and use and innovate applications on top of that. So they have a plan, and they're moving quickly ahead, and they have actually passed number of base stations than in India now in 6 months compared to Europe.
Would it be useful to see such a plan rolled out more widely in other regions? I mean, we talk about the market-based approach. Sometimes the market doesn't react as fast as it could.
I think you need to have this public partnership, private partnership thing on these things. I think it's good. I think Europe has we are very good in the early phases of research and doing that. But then we need to take that to the next level through sort of the deployment and industrialization phase, and actually have it deployed and used. And there we could do better. Mm-hmm. And I think we as an industry, together with the governments across Europe, can do better here.
Joining.
Just last month I visited India, and I knew that India is very active to creating a Make in India. Is that have some impact on your business? No impact?
Well, it's too early to say if it's going to be there might be an Indian competitor to Ericsson at some day, and that's fine. I think we like competition. This competition is what makes us not complacent, and we have to go, we have to work hard and innovate and make better products than competition can do. And so it might happen, but at the moment we are one of the bigger deployments in India, so we have a good market there. So it's at the moment very nice for us, or it's very tough, I would say, because they have a high expectation of timely deliveries as well. So.
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, that's good.
Peter, could I ask you about industrial plans? I know the Commission does have plans in this area, but this is something that's a bit more directive in trying to get rollout moving faster. Is that something that's on your radar that you see the Commission either doing or other governments doing?
Yeah, so we have indeed several elements here. So one that was mentioned, I think also in the interview before, was a bit the framework conditions for the rollout. I think there, and I think also mentioned here from the supply side to create the conditions. So there we have, on the one hand, this Gigabit Infrastructure Act, where there's a proposal is being negotiated. So really to look at the bottlenecks, look at the make permits faster, get the infrastructure out. So cut red tape, cut costs, basically. So this is something that we are taking very seriously. And then the other side is what was mentioned here with industrialization plan, public-private partnerships. That's about working together, creating opportunities, building the ecosystems. And there we have the late phase of the research programs where we're doing that, but also now with deployment programs. One example is, for example, the Connecting Europe facility, where we have 5G communities, where we like a bit more bottom up, trying to develop some ecosystems from the public angle, schools, hospitals, for example. And then also the 5G corridors, which is a bit of a flagship initiative to look at the automotive and the rail sector and get the infrastructure along the transport paths. It is a big challenge, as also market failure and investment gap. So there we're using these kind of partnerships. So I think we're also quite good at that in terms of partnerships. Of course, what always is a challenge, like India is indeed a huge market, is in Europe we're a bit fragmented. So we have member state by member states, also the regulatory conditions. And here, of course, we can try to coordinate and try to also harmonize as much as possible to make this, to create the scale at the end of the day.
Peter, can I ask you about Open RAN? How useful do you see that, and what risks do you see?
Yeah, Open RAN, I think it's an interesting industry or market trend. I mean, we have first versions of the Open RAN specifications that are now being developed. When you look at the organization that is driving that, the Telecom Infrastructure Project has a roadmap like from 2025 that they would see that ready for real deployment. So in the moment, indeed, there's a lot of trialing, a lot of piloting. So this is interesting to follow. And then, there are opportunities for sure also to look at bringing in new players, bringing in innovation in the network space. And then, of course, we had the report that you might have seen from the security experts from the member states, where we also look at the risk, because then if you open up this, the threat surface, then of course you have to be sure that you also, in this new complex environment, you also trust the technology. So I think, we see opportunities and also some risks that we need to work on. And then, of course, it will also be then, as I said, there's also the challenge to bring this into the existing legacy. And there, I think we see also the opportunity, of course, when we make a next step in terms of new technologies, for example, 6G, that we see that, of course, as an opportunity to look into that as also a design perspective.
Per, where do you see Open RAN fitting into this?
Yeah, so I first of all, I agree a lot what Peter is saying here, and I think we also have to think what is Open RAN. Open RAN is consisting of many different technologies, I think. One key one is the use of the cloud technologies and the cloud layers for compute of the workload of the RAN. And of course, Ericsson is working on that. We have actually products on that. And we actually offered those products versus India, but they are not as mature because, of course, we want to provide as good as reliant and resilient and secure networks as we can to our customers. And they selected the traditional way of working, at least for now. But I'm personally convinced that we will use more cloud technologies in the mobile networks. It will be used in RAN, and I think that is the future, but we just need to mature the technology so that we can trust it and use it wisely on that one. And then there is some other aspects of Open RAN. There is this connection between the cloud system and the base or the radio, which is called the lower layer split, which has been contentious for some time. And there is also a need to improve that standard, because there needs to be a standard, otherwise it cannot be open. So that work is ongoing, and it will. We'll see when it will be ready, but there are some important meetings next week to have detailed discussions and decisions on that. And maybe next year sometime we will see products using that standard. That then will be performing equally or hopefully better than the versions that exist today. Because ultimately we need to provide performance, we need to provide security, we need to provide resilience. So nobody likes when the network is down. So we need to have that up and running and as the same pace as the other one. But it will be coming, and there's a lot of good technology in it. So we have talked a lot about AI before, and one thing that it enables is more of the automation, faster deployments in that case, and faster than optimization of the networks. So with the help of AI, we could do more in that area. But that's also sort of in the coming, as technology takes a long time to mature.
So where do you see the Open RAN debate?
Thank you. Thank you for. Actually, the recent years, Open RAN becomes a hot issue. Everyone talked about Open RAN, but for me, it's nothing new. I have a long history with the Open RAN, dating back to the 3G or 4G era. At that time, actually, it all starts with a battle between operator at the time and vendor. That battle, actually, the operator wanted to avoid vendor locked-in. So that's the main purpose for the Open RAN at that time. So actually, some European operators wanted to standardize. Then we completed the standardization. Finally, it becomes a standard in Etsy. But only NTT Docomo uses that standard for commercial deployment. That's disaster, no meaning, meaningless. Standard is meaningless unless it's widely deployed. So that's my bitter experience for Open RAN. But now, ironically, geopolitics accelerated the Open RAN. So actually now, many tech vendors joined the activities. Some progress made. So at that time, very early stage, I don't believe that it will be successful. But now, I think something may happen. So in the future, it may take time, but actually, I believe something happened. Something kind of the innovator's dilemma will happen. So in general, strong players want to not to change current ecosystem, but probably Ericsson is also now trying to ready for the new ecosystem, for vendor ecosystem. That's my feeling.
So just to comment on that, is that of course we are always for new technology, as you know, but we have to come timely also. So we have to be ready, and we have to have the ecosystem with us. We have to have scale, because if we don't have scale, it's going to cost a lot, as I think NTT Docomo have experienced.
But in general, it takes time to change the vendor ecosystem. Actually, when we looked at the semiconductor industry, now from the vertical integrated system to the horizontal system, I checked that how many years. It's over 20 years it took. So you are safe.
Yeah, it takes time to change from vertical to horizontal, but we are on that journey.
I mean, you touched there on geopolitics. I mean, that's something, we live in a hot world these days. There are a lot of tensions. There's a lot of talk about security, even in the last few months, a lot of fears about certain countries, about what standards you roll out and how, what kind of tension levels are there at the standards organizations? How do you see this play out? How do you involve different sides to work together?
Yeah, actually, this is also some points to discuss for the Open RAN. I don't know, but some camp for the negative campaign, Open RAN is very risky because it is open. Everyone can attack, can consider attack. But the other side, it's open, so it's safe because everyone can protect, make a protection for that. Both opinions. But anyway, it's just for the fight against both camp of the support of Open RAN and negative side of the Open RAN. But anyway, probably I don't remember such final conclusion, but the All RAN Alliance consider this issue carefully designed for the security issues. That's a very general issues. Security is general issues that even for the Open RAN or not closed RAN, it's both systems need to have security. Security. Yeah.
Peter, how do you see the debate on standards changing? I mean, the last few years there's been a lot of discussion at the Commission, and of course we see concerns about security. What's changed there in most recently?
Yeah, maybe the first point to mention is that the attention by governments and by society overall, of course, to these kind of technologies has increased a lot. So because of its importance, and the geopolitical tensions, of course, accelerate that. That we talked about de-risking and decoupling before. So about having a certain level of control or some position in this kind of supply chains. So this is certainly something that has gained a lot of momentum, and everyone is really on it. Also from a governance side, for example, the US in the past on 5G and 4G, they left that completely to the market, so they were not so active, and now they really also much more active on the government side. So this is shifting a bit. Overall, I think the global standardization approach in the moment is not challenged at this point in time. I think the 3GPP model, developing global standards, is still recognized. Some temptations, we talked about India before. I mean, if you have these huge scale markets, sometimes some regions might say, okay, we have so much scale, we might even try to get a competitive advantage by developing something proprietary or something for us. In the past, that was not very successful. We think about China in the era of 3G. So I think this is still a model that everyone subscribed to, but then of course we have to see a bit how if geopolitical tensions even increase much further, then there might be some things to reconsider there. But for the moment, I think it's good. And then it's about basically the race there. We have another race in terms of technology leadership for the regions, that the standards are going in the interest of the regions. For example, we have an interest to develop these standards in a way for us according to our values. So that's important how these standards are shaped. And then of course from an industrial perspective, that our companies, we have one prominent one on stage, we have a good position, that we also then continue to have a good position and maybe leverage to other areas that are related, like chips and cloud. So this is certainly a very, very important strategic area, standardization.
And multiple standards, how problematic is it? I mean, how much can the market accept several?
Well, it's economies of scale. I mean, it will just be an issue for cost. It depends, of course, always how different it will be. If it's some feature that is different that might be implemented in a multi-mode way, I mean, this always depends. If you have completely different approaches to standards, you have an issue with scale there. The markets will indeed then be separate, and you would have also an issue with roaming potentially. Then you have to build in very, very different standards in the devices, and the global roaming is of course then also a challenge. That was the beauties of the previous generation, that we know we go out wherever in the world and our phone functions. So this is of course also a feature that we want to keep.
May I comment on the standardization for?
I'd like to come to Per. Can I come back to you? Per, I wanted to ask you about global standards and some of the geopolitical tensions. Where do you see that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Peter is saying that we are today, and I think the whole industry, and what I hear from the governments, that they want to continue with the way we have been successfully done it the last 20 years in 3GPP for air interface type of standards. But as we were talking about now, we are also into this horizontalization of things, and then there are other standards that becomes important as well, that are need to sort of mature to become more global standards. Especially if we talk about the cloud players here in the cloud area, it's not so standardized on how to do it. It's not so easy to move from one cloud to another cloud. And us as a global vendor need to use multiple type of clouds when we want to deploy products. For instance, 5G core networks now, the SA that we've talked about. So we need to do that. So there we can do more to become more like harmonized and global. That's not so much on the geopolitical tension, but it's more of that the market is not there yet on that. I'm optimistic that we will retain and keep the air interface one, because I see strong incentives from all sides of the geopolitical side to do that. And both China and US and Europe and India have incentives to keep it as we have it. There will always be some localized requirements coming in. We have that already today, of course. There is no single operator that have exactly the same setup of frequency bands. So they have different types of radios, and we accommodate that in one global standard. We have different cryptos for security things that is used in different countries. And we can do some more of that. I think we will see some more of that localized requirements that I think we can accommodate in the global air interface standards, and to some extent in these more horizontal layers where we can have more localized requirements built in, I think.
Yeah, just before replying that issue, I just wanted to say our ITU's activities on Open RAN. So far, ITU did not was not so involved in the Open RAN standardization, but some voices comes up to handle this. Also, ITU has a power to reach to these developing countries. So, but I understand that there are already many activities Open RAN. Open RAN is one of them. So we should not create unnecessary duplication work for the efficiency of the standardization. So we need to collaborate with other organizations. So we are now some idea to do that. Just one. This is just I wanted to say one. And for the future direction for the from geopolitics. Anyway, technology should overcome geopolitics. We need to achieve one interoperable standard. And I'm also optimistic because for the mobile system, we have already huge market. If there comes some newcomers or new technology should be started with a niche market. It's not so. We have a big advantage, so less possibility for such new technology to come. That's my point. However, that your local specification. I mean that we must be careful about the fragmentation within a single standard. Today we have already a single standard, but many options and parameters. So we need to find some solution to operate. So we need to be careful about that. I'm optimistic to keep the single standard, but we need to work harder and harder to make the standards, single standard, more simpler than now. Yeah.
I'm glad you're optimistic, because it does seem a time where there's more stress, that the risk of fragmentation is much bigger. We see a lot more assertive forces behind certain standards. I mean, Peter, do you see this as a time where it's more likely to see global fragmentation, and how do you think that this can be prevented? I mean, India especially, and then you see China as well as coming out very
China is
fast.
quite keen on developing the global standard. I think they also quite happy that Europe is in a position to moderate there. I mean, we are I think have the partnerships and the cooperation models in the past that gave us a very good position there. And China is really keen to cooperate, of course, coming in with a lot of ambition. And there we have to look at the governance and to be sure that things are fair, that the influences of power in these organizations are fair, that we have the rules are following the WTO principles. That's also the case for Open RAN Alliance, for example, where we have to talk a bit. So I think there, and then yeah, we have maybe when we look at the ORAN Alliance, at a point people were a bit nervous, saying, okay, this organization is now doing its own thing, but then there was quite a lot of interest to bring these specifications also then to the ETSI process. We have a process there to bring it into a harmonized standard that we would accept as a real standard. So I think at the end, if these new developments also are looking for success, then there is always the ambitions or the motivation to make this as global as possible. And then when it comes to fragmentation from bigger regions that are now starting up and that have a lot of potential, developing something that might be a bit different. Yeah, I think we had the case a bit in 5G. I think we found a way. And I'm a bit optimistic, similarly as Seizo, to overcome that as well.
Per, to ask you a last word, do you see global fragmentation as a risk? Is that something you worry about?
Well, it's always a risk, but I'm not worrying about it too much. I'm trying to work hard to not, we will not end up there. By driving and being part of the early 6G research in various different regions, that's also makes it easier for us to sort of align the results, and then it's easier to make it as one global standard in the end. And we are also working hard in 3GPP and other places in order to be a driving force, so that we can ensure that we have a good working global standard there as a company. And I think I'm still optimistic, and I think the risk is there, but we should just pay attention to that risk and work hard to try to avoid it.
Thank you very much for joining us, Peter Stockman from the European Commission, Per Bremming from Ericsson, and Cesar Oldaway from the ITU. I appreciate it very much. It's been very good to discuss some of these issues at a time of great stress. I mean, I understand that you're being very optimistic about both 5G rollout and about the chances of a global standard. But I think you've both all been very forthcoming about the kind of issues that are there and the potential risks that we face. Thank you very much. And if I can ask the audience to please stay seated, because you'll have another panel very shortly. We'll have a spotlight discussion with Mark Scott, our Chief Technology Correspondent, who's going to be talking about online content and protecting children need policing. Who will enforce the rules? Thank you very much.